All right. So I think last time we dabbled in a few different topics, but I think for this one, we'll try to be a little bit more focused. I think what I want to talk about today was just the, how Igorots were portrayed. So like, well, not really, yeah, portrayed, but in terms of like the World Fair, the most famous one when you Google it is like the 1904 World Fair, and then how that ties into performances, modern performances now. Because traditionally, at least from what I know, correct me if I'm wrong, all of our dances and all those things, they were never really presentations. They were more traditions and things we did to celebrate or, yeah, do any of those. But yeah, essentially how you guys felt about those two things and how they connect. So I know I've talked to Mark about this before, but yeah. So what do you guys think
Yeah,
about
I
that?
can go on and on about this stuff, but
Exactly.
yeah, how about you guys first?
Go Mano. I have no opinions.
Nice.
I
You
think
want me to go over a little bit of history that I was able to cover?
yeah. Once you touch base,
Mhm,
rehash a little bit.
mhm,
So it's really interesting. The most popular one that everybody knows about is basically the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. But
mhm,
the one in St. Louis was actually one of many in the United States, and really a lot of this exhibitioning started in London. Actually, there was one in 1851, and Spain brought some Filipinos over there. I
mm,
couldn't find, yeah, I couldn't find information whether or not those Filipinos were where they were from and what language, either what languages they spoke, or who they were. Uh, it's because I didn't want to pay for the extra money to
for
to get the
research.
research
You're
paper.
so cheap.
You gotta pay for a whole subscription. So, anyways, but I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, it started out over there, and it was apparently it influenced a lot of other countries to start this,
Mm,
to kind of think about doing some type of exposition. And there was this book called "The Culture of Imperial Abundance," and there was an excerpt in there that I read that was regarding how it influenced the United States, um, especially since they were kind of like a growing colonial power at the time. And of course, like in the 1890s, that's when they start to get the Philippines from the
mm,
Spaniards, and then they get all these other countries so that they can build up their resources as an imperial power. But 18 that exposition was kind of a part of that, and it showed the United States that like Filipinos could be used as somewhat of a commodity. And before we got online, we were kind of talking about this, but we wanted to stop talking so we can bring it to you over here and just keep on talking about that concept of commodity, in colonialism. And it's pretty interesting because like after the World's Fair, uh, in before the World's Fair, uh, in 1887, there was one in Madrid, and ICB,
mm,
which is the IIC, it's like the International Igorot Consultation of Europe. It's mainly all the European countries with all the Igorots come together and they consult about certain things. And in I think 2007, there was a resolution that they had to talk about the Igorots that they brought over in from into that World's Fair in 1887, and basically to ask about, hey, you guys haven't addressed the issue of you guys taking our people over there and displaying them as like, a human zoo. And Jose Rizal was actually kind of pissed off because that during that time period he was actually trying to um, build put a Filipino. He wanted to have Filipinos represented, but he wanted to do something on the arts and the materials and the goods that are coming out of the Philippines. But then when they kind of basically said they kind of went, I guess they must have went behind his back and they brought in Igorot people as a way because they knew that the other things that Jose Rizal wouldn't be attractive, so they thought they would bring the wild people and apparently they justified it by saying. The classification of these wild people go under plants and animals. So that's how they justify it. It's horrible, man. It's
Fauna.
horrible. Yeah, that's how they justified it according because indigenous people were kind of like classified under that. So they're like, yeah, we can. They're part of the plants and animals. So, and they're from the Philippines. Why can't we do this? And so Jose Rizal was pretty pissed off about that, and he actually made some interesting quotes. I think one of the quotes was like, "I would rather that they because what happened is that one of the ladies who went over there, obviously a lot of these people weren't exposed to certain diseases, and one lady who came over to Spain, one of our people, got pneumonia and died. And Jose Rizal was so pissed off, and he said, I would rather that they all get sick and die so they would suffer no more. Let the Philippines forget that her sons have been treated like this to be exhibited and ridiculed." And so that what happened in 1904 extends a little bit further back. And then once it happened in 1904, there were some other more famous expositions. In 1909, they had another one called the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exhibition. And then
Seattle,
in 1913, yeah, in Seattle. And then in 1913, they had something called the Universal Exhibition in Ghent, Belgium. And there was another person that died in Belgium. But what was really interesting is that Belgium actually named I think it was a tunnel after him or a bridge. They named it after the person, and I can't remember the guy's name. But I thought that was pretty interesting that at least they even recognized that in Belgium. So they kind of like made some type of reparation in terms of like what had happened, because I'm sure that they don't feel good about that. On the flip side of the coin, what's interesting is that Antonio Buangan, or Tony Buangan from BBEC of Northern California, he made a research paper purely based on his own need to research his own ancestry on the Suyok Igorots who went to in 1904, because apparently some of them were his relatives from both his mom and his dad's side. So he has this really nice, I think it's a 25-page paper. I haven't been able to read the whole thing in complete detail. I scanned over it with what time we had, and he has a lot of interesting story behind there because and from the past like consultations, what I've heard is that a lot of the people who did go, they weren't exactly kind of like just innocent, and then like they wanted to explore the world, so they weren't innocent in terms of like wanting to go and see what the rest of the world was like. But of course, at the same time, I don't think many of them knew that they were being used as propaganda for the governments of those countries. And then also, well, I'm sure that they knew that they were making money off of them, but the trade-off was that they were getting paid a minimum. So I remember reading. So those other ones I talked about, the one in 1904 in the States, and then 1909. Apparently, there were different ones around the United States where they brought the rest of the Igorots who didn't go back, and then they traveled them across in different parts.
Yeah.
And the guy who was managing them, I forgot his name. He was a real tyrant, and as when he wouldn't pay them properly, and even when they would ask, and it had to go down to the president to kind of like save those guys and let them go back to the country. And there was going to be one more big exposition in 1915, actually in San Francisco, but the Philippines by then, at that time in 1914, had stopped all the stop the human zoos using using Igorot folks. So the government in the Philippines actually stopped it, and so the no more people were sent, I believe, to San Francisco in 1915. So I think it stretches all the way. This human zoo stuff stretches in the United States, at least, from 1904 all the way to like 1914 or
I
something.
believe it goes up into the all the way up into the 1920s because there are people who actually remained and made it kind of like
those are the ones
their job actually
Yeah.
to do that. And so all of these things lasted till about the late 1920s.